Welcome boys and girls, Costin here with a discussion about some of the scariest AI armies to deal with in the game. Because there are certain factions, certain Legendary Lords that may not be so great as a faction, but they can have, and do usually have, at least one really powerful army that you should tread lightly when you're dealing with them. Starting at number 5, we have Mother Ostankya. Now, Mother Ostankya herself in combat, she's a mobile artillery piece with a bunch of benefits for magic. She also has magical attacks for her entire army, and she does have a fairly nasty skill line available to her as well. Honestly, the benefit with dealing with Ostankya is that usually Morathi deals with her in most campaigns, or you're playing Morathi, really. But the thing is, what makes Ostankya so dangerous to tackle? Beyond the inherent benefits of her skill line, her magic, Kislevite warriors, Akshinas, all the monster units she has. And Kislev units are pretty close to unbreakable. In the sense they won't quite break, but by our blood ability makes them very, very close to being unbreakable, especially when it matters. That does make Kislev factions dangerous to deal with. But where Ostankya wins out is with the Witch Hut. So the Witch Hut can give her a ton of buffs and debuffs to her entire army. And she can acquire a vast amount of these buffs and debuffs. Things like reducing leadership, things like just in general buffing her units in a lot of ways, like things like speed, physical resistance, leadership, armor piercing damage, or making your entire army useless. And she can do both of these things at the same time. So if she gets a lot of these incantations, and she generally will, provided she survives Morathi, then she can just completely debuff your army into the ground while completely buffing up her own force. And that makes Ostankya a very dangerous foe to deal with. Honestly, she would actually be more dangerous, far more dangerous, if her unit recruitment wasn't unlimited early on, because she can only get certain unit types in her campaign unless she meets a faction of Kislev, which she likely won't when being played by the AI. Because if she could recruit armor Kassars and Sargard and all that, she would be even crazier. And thankfully, there are ways of auto-resolving against her, because the units she can recruit don't necessarily have the best level of armor. But if you end up fighting her on a battlefield, be prepared, because it's gonna hurt. At number 4, we have Drycha of the Wood Elves. Now, the Wood Elves in general do have severe limitations in recruitment. They can only recruit from the trees, and they have limited recruitment slots, so even AI can struggle with that specific aspect. But here's the thing, Drycha doesn't really care what kind of units she has. She could have Bretonnian peasants, and she would still be one of the most terrifying things to deal with. First off, she can actually get all these kind of upgrades for her units, which, yes, makes her units that much more dangerous. On top of that, she has malevolent forest spirit units, so things like treekin, treemen, and dryads. Now, the thing about them is they have frenzy, and they also cause fear. And that is pretty scary to deal with. So it means your army is fighting up a mountain, up a hill, against these kind of units. Yes, they are vulnerable to fire, but they will dish out a ton of damage and won't break so easily as you might think. But that's not what makes Drycha so damn freaking terrifying to deal with, really. It's actually her own combat capability, and that's the point of this video. She gets melee attack, weapon strength for Dryad units. She can summon some of them in battle. That is pretty scary. And then the ultimate version of Drycha involves her special skill line, because that is where she becomes ridiculous. I mean, we could also talk about her item, and yes, the AI will get these things eventually. So she can increase the cooldowns, like she will disrupt your casting capability. Her legendary hero, which she only has, is pretty dangerous. She negates magical weapons within an effect area and reduces spell resistance, which, yes, is freaking terrifying when you're talking about Drycha herself. But here's the thing. She depletes ammunition of a unit. She replaces Glamored so she doesn't have a downside with Elven units. She can ambush you. She can cause fear and terror when ambushing in forests. She can prevent movement. She can recruit branch wraiths and increase the leadership of her units as well. So, dealing with Drycha in a fight is freaking terrifying in more ways than one, really. I mean, her entire skill line means that her army is just gonna cause your own to rout very quickly. And these are not necessarily units that you can kill quickly either. And Dryads themselves, one may underestimate them. In general, I don't think they're worth recruiting if you're playing. But Dryads are pretty damn powerful when they're recruited en masse by the AI who buffs them through the roof. And that's absolutely what Drycha is going to do in her campaign. It's just an absurd combination of abilities. In essence, it creates a kind of situation where fighting her is fighting like an endgame crisis army, even if she only has an entire force of Dryads recruited in her own army. That's what makes her dangerous. The way you deal with Drycha is you kind of try and auto-resolve, because fighting her one-on-one with equal numbers is usually a really bad proposition unless you have a high-end army or an army dedicated towards defeating her. That is genuinely terrifying. She's not actually that powerful in combat herself. Like, her own personal combat capability does leave a lot to be desired, but the combination of buffs and debuffs makes her just damn freaking scary to tackle. At number 3, we have Arbaal the Undefeated. Now, with the Arbaal situation, it really is the fact that he can start by recruiting mortal units, so things like Chaos Warriors of Khorne he can get very quickly. You can then also get Chaos Warriors of Khorne with halberds, and then Chaos Warriors of Khorne with dual weapons. And that is already a fairly dangerous proposition when you consider just how good these units are from pretty early on in a campaign. Gotta help you if you goes down the Chosen Skull Reaper path, or even Exalted Bloodletters, though Arbaal is very dangerous with those kind of mortal units. Yes, if you are playing Malachi and have an entire ranged army, you can defeat him, but that's Malachi in a nutshell. His actual Malachi is not on this list, not because he can't be powerful, but because usually the AI just doesn't use him properly. Whereas when you're dealing with Arbaal, he will throw a lot of fucking forces at you, and you can recruit those forces pretty quickly between Gaze of Khorne, Hellblade ability for Chaos Warriors, Chosen, Chaos Knights. Yeah, having Hellblade is ridiculous. Weapon strength capability, discouraged effect, reducing leadership. And then, yeah, just all kinds of benefits in his own army beyond the inherent benefits of Khorne, including things like devastating flanker for Chaos Knights and Skullcrusher units, expert charge defense, upkeep benefits, which doesn't necessarily matter all that much, but unbreakable for non-demonic units. And the thing about Khorne armies is that, especially with Arbaal, is he will usually get a bunch of highly experienced units. So think of the fact that Chaos Warriors of Khorne, the default one, is a pretty dangerous unit to tackle from the beginning of the campaign inherently. Then you make them unbreakable, and you then realize how insane this guy ends up being. I mean, his item is nothing to really write home about, but just the fact that he has those kind of benefits of Chaos Warriors of Khorne. And here's the thing. You defeat one army of Arbaal that is relatively experienced, very dangerous on its own, he's going to recruit another one, and another one, and another one. Like, it is the most dangerous when you're just dealing with him leading the army because of all the benefits he has, but in general, his faction is pretty scary to deal with, but Arbaal just makes it that much scarier. At number 2, we have Archaon the Everchosen. People may talk about Valkia, but honestly, I think Archaon is much more dangerous. Unless you're playing Boris Ursus, in which case you can, though not always, defeat Archaon before he becomes a huge threat in your campaign. Yes, Warriors of Chaos have recruitment issues, but then there's Archaon, who kind of doesn't care about those recruitment issues, at least for one army. units in his army gain weapon strength and missile strength per rank achieved. That, a free person, it's already very dangerous, and given Archaon's inherent situation of gaining experience for units and lowered crew rank, you can understand that you're going to be dealing with a bunch of highly experienced units in his army. Or you will deal with max rank units, because the crazy thing about Archaon is not the regular Chaos Warriors army, it's the fact that this guy has the entire roster of Chaos regiments of renown available in his campaign. And here's the thing, his AI is in a fairly safe starting position. And that means he can absolutely and generally will get the ranks required to be able to recruit all of these regiments renown. And since they're max rank units, you can kind of understand where I'm getting with this. I mean, the fact he starts with Swords of Chaos as units, right? Swords of Chaos regiment renown with 100 weapon strength and armor piercing regiment renowned Chaos Knights because of the benefits he has, between the unit experience as well as his own inherent buff to that, makes him very, very dangerous to tackle. The way you defeat Warriors of Chaos is you take out the Dark Fortresses, right? You remove their recruitment centers, though that's not necessarily the easiest thing in the world either, because they're heavily fortified locations with very strong inherent garrisons. But then Archaon shows up with his main force. The way you win against him is a harder version of Drycha. He doesn't have the same kind of fear benefits and anti-magical benefits that Drycha has, but he just has that much scarier of an army. And yes, this is ridiculous. And even if you defeat Archaon in a battle, assume you don't kill him. And killing Archaon in a battle is a bit of a sketchy situation considering the items he has, like Slayer of Kings, the armor, all that kind of stuff. He personally is actually quite dangerous. The combination of casting capability, melee skill line, melee capability is something that makes him dangerous. The AI doesn't necessarily use him and doesn't necessarily level him up in the best possible way. Though demonic is kind of a useless trait in a lot of situations. But when it does, it ends up being fairly scary. And what's even worse is he gets all of these gifts of chaos. Yes, he starts with them locked, but if you leave him time to grow, he will become a major fucking problem to deal with. And here's the thing. The terrain he's in, the campaign location he's in, unless Boris Ursus wipes him out, assuming you're not playing him, which more often than not, Archaon will win that fight. Unless Boris Ursus wipes him out, he's probably going to get at least 2 free citadels, right? Dark fortresses. It's going to be a nightmare dealing with him from that perspective, because it's a lot of ground to cover. It's slowing you down because of the attrition you're taking, and you have big fights at the end of it. Dealing with Archaon in the end game is a nightmare. Actually, dealing with him as any faction that doesn't start close to him is a real frustrating situation. It's a shame his AI, the Warriors of Chaos AI, is not better, because he is genuinely scary to tackle. And finally, at number 1, it is Tamurkhan, the Maggot Lord. What's worth mentioning about Nurgle and demons in general, they have army abilities. So with Tamurkhan, he starts with the Curse of the Slug. Let's ignore the plagues for a second, because that's its own discussion, and the AI's capability of using plagues is its own question mark. But here's the thing. There are other army abilities that Nurgle gets. So you, for instance, get Fecundy, which replenishes HP of combatants, which is pretty dangerous, and also restores vigor. And then you also look at Rot, Glorious Rot. This is what makes Tamurkhan so damn freaking crazy in any campaign that lasts a period of time, because he can get these abilities and just use them and literally kill you with those. He can solo armies. It doesn't matter how many units you have or what endgame, what power they have. This guy is crazy. He's very, very durable with the ability of Nurgle's favored son. He also gets a bunch of benefits for non-demonic units, but Nurgle's recruitment capability does leave a lot to be desired. However, His personal combat capability is a very different situation. He reduces the leadership of your units. He causes damage to combatants in range. This gets very, very dangerous when you start stacking all of things up. And believe it or not, Nurgle will stack these up. He's got regeneration. He's got good HP. He makes Toad Dragons unbreakable. He starts as unbreakable, so you can't even just rout him. No, you have to kill him. And this guy is honestly just ridiculously so. Like, he reduces your stats by a significant amount. He does a lot of damage in AoE, and even if you try and duel him with a powerful lord, good luck with that, because he will literally not die, obviously healing cap applies, and instead damage your lord and heal himself when that happens, when his HP drops to 0. That is what makes Tamurkhan so damn dangerous to deal with in battle. He's riding a massive Toad Dragon, so you might think big target, easy to deal with range units, right? Wrong! Wrong. Seriously. Killing this guy with range is an exercise in futility, unless it's very high level range. You need a combination of debuffs, powerful armies, and you gotta hope he doesn't have a powerful army in his own right. And funny fact about that, while obviously he only has the Nurgle units, there's still a decent amount of Nurgle regiments right now available in his campaign. Also, he can get all of those chieftains, though, yeah, his AI will struggle with that, and regular heroes of Nurgle. So not only do you have an entire army to deal with, you have a guy that can solo endgame armies on his own. That is the might of Tamurkhan in a campaign, and he really is number one. You can think of like Malice Darkblade, but Malice Darkblade can be contained, right? And he's also not dealing AoE to his entire enemy's army, debuffing them and healing at the same time. That's the thing about Malice Darkblade. Tamurkhan, he gives no shits. That's why he's number one on this list. One could argue about Grimgor. Sure. And Grimgor is a great duelist, and he's very scary. But here's the thing. Grimgor, there are ways to deal with Grimgor, cheesing him, or having enough damage capability that you tackle him. Unless he gets to a very high level, that's a different proposition. But Grimgor is great in duels. He's very scary in that perspective. Grimgor is not an army killer. Tamurkhan is great in duels. He's great as an army killer, and he starts as being unbreakable and has a really powerful amount on top of all that, beyond all the Nurgle capabilities that Nurgle inherently has or can acquire relatively quickly in a campaign. That's all I had to say. Costin signing out. I'll see you on the next one. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications.